Helluva Boss is an animated series posted to YouTube to watch for free, made by Vivian Medrano, aka Vivzepop, and her team with Spindle Horse. Many may know her from Hazbin Hotel, a similar show that takes place in the same world, at least so it seems, as Helluva Boss, or from Zoophobia, or even an animated video from quite some time ago at this point, featuring an Anthro Blue Wolf character dancing to Kesha's Die Young. I've been a long-time fan from the days I spent outside of my faith that I was born into, Catholicism, as a New Age pagan sort of thing, I guess, spiritualism, etc., whatever, and even since coming back to Catholicism and practicing more traditionally than before even, I'm a huge fan, what can I say? I enjoy the content, it's good, and I admire it and respect it for what it is. The more I've seen with Helluva Boss, and I'm completely caught up with that, I tend to watch them as they release, and Hazbin I can't watch as much because, well, it's a bit more formal of a situation, and I just don't really have access to that at the moment, so I've only got the pilot and bare minimum stuff for that anyone really could. But I keep noticing things, and from the Christian's perspective, it's actually really cool and funny and amusing, and there's so many little things that, whether or not Miss Medrano herself is a Christian or something else, whatever, I don't really think that's any of my business. It doesn't really matter to me specifically at all, but I do think there's plenty of nods towards Christianity in the culture, whether it is something that many have just grown up around but not actually explicitly been part of, or something they've been part of and see and roll their eyes at themselves. I know for myself, there have been plenty of times I've seen other quote-unquote Christians who most people would just assume. They say they're Christian, they seem to be, they have crosses, whatever. They must be then. But then they do things, they say things, etc. And it just doesn't really fit actual what Christianity is supposed to be. And there's so much in this show that calls this out, and I love it. I absolutely adore it. It's so much fun, and it's so vindicating or validating, I don't know, something like that. Just to see it like, yes, I'm not the only one who's aware of that and how stupid it is. Of course, the thing is, though, most people, well, at least most people who would probably be watching the show and engaging with the fandom, etc., they probably don't realize that most Christians aren't actually what is being called out, that at least the genuine ones who actually practice as they're supposed to, and not just saying they are, and seem to at a very surface level, shallowness sorts of way. In episode 1 of season 1, we have a human family that, for all intents and purposes, comes off outwardly at least as being a good Christian household. The stereotypical Southern family, you could even say, potentially, at least for present day. And yet they very clearly aren't actually good people. One of the conflicts of this episode is actually Moxie struggling to take out and assassinate people who potentially aren't bad, or even to hurt the family with, the innocent children and etc. and what have you. And obviously that's a bit silly because clearly the family in its entirety is not a good set of people. They're pretty terrible, actually, despite the fact that they're speaking, I guess you could say, praise or for in favor of God, and clearly the Christian sort is the kind we're trying to get at here. They're trying to do away with the demons, which, fair enough, I guess. Overall, it's pretty obvious they're not good people. There's the question then of if this family is supposed to represent actual good, faithful families, or if it's actually meant to represent the stereotype of what people think of, which I don't think necessarily you could say one way or another for certain, which both works for and against my position here, holding out and hoping that Helluva and Hazbin will actually end up being favorable, I suppose you could say, in terms of agreeing with the Christian side of things and just happen to be showing it and telling the story in a very fun and exciting and insightful sort of way from the perspective of those within hell as this all happens. Of course, too, as the season goes on, and even into season 2, where we are now, we do see that each character has their own struggles, their own issues that prevent them from proper happiness and fulfillment and contentment and peace, etc. Which, on one hand, this could just be, interesting, entertaining characters who need to develop and grow, etc., whatever. But it could also just be showing how even those who seem happiest, for example, Millie and Moxie, they can't escape how miserable and terrible their lives within hell actually are. In Season 4, the CHERUB episode, we meet several members of Team Cherub, and at first they seem to be exactly what little cute angels should be, positive and happy, and trying to convince the crotchety old man that he shouldn't off himself, and instead should find beauty in life and donate things and help people, etc., what have you, which is all well and good, sure, and it is quite entertaining seeing our beloved members of Imp battling against the cherubs, and especially when it comes time for the cute little angelful to snap, and we go full battle mode, and it's pretty cool and fun, and there's some sort of appeasement by the end of the episode when we find out that the three we've been watching try to sabotage our members actually aren't allowed to go back into heaven, which is devastating to them, and the way that they are told this as well as many of the things they say earlier in the episode as well, is just so perfect for the sort of passive, timid, not really wanting to deal with true conflict, but technically having to, because rules are rules sort of personality that you see so often within Christian realms. It's all just to a T. And again, I can't technically say for sure, obviously, whether or not this is saying we're using these stereotypes to say what is Christianity and Christians and that culture and livelihood, etc., or just using the stereotypes for fun, at least for now, because as it will turn out eventually, there's a point in saying that these stereotypes aren't actually genuinely Christian after all. And one of the reasons I actually lean towards the latter is not just my personal bias, but also that the cherub team that we saw in this episode, they're not allowed back into heaven. And although the reason given is that somebody died, which for theological reasons, I have a lot to say, we're not going to get into the theology, but setting the reason itself aside, the fact that they're not allowed back, and at that point, they're fallen, I guess. I mean, we don't really know, I suppose, but it shows that these characters who were behaving in the stereotypical cultural understanding of how those Christians tend to be, where they say their things, they act their ways, but really they're just as terrible and awful and bad as all the rest of us. They just have their noses stuck up, blah, 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 blah. In behaving in that sort of stereotypical way, they get themselves removed and banned from heaven. And I think that suggests that in this universe, in this canon, heaven isn't what the stereotypical Christian understanding is. And I'm here for it. I want to see it. Let's go. I actually have other points on this topic as well, but I do not currently have the energy within me to get into them, as making these sorts of videos, despite how low effort they probably come across as, takes a lot from me. Video creation or even dealing with audio in this sort of way is not something that is my forte, it's not my field. I'm just doing it because it happens to work a bit better than writing and just typing and posting that sort of stuff. But I do have plenty more to say on this, including specific characters in particular. I suppose I'll eventually touch on each one of them, perhaps, depending on how this goes, but I have more reasons that I would eventually like to discuss as well. And yeah, I just hope we can all enjoy the fun of this ride together.